For centuries, two nations separated by just a tiny sliver of water were locked in one of the most intense, most defining rivalries in all of human history. We're talking about England and France, of course, and how their epic struggle didn't just shape their own countries, it literally forged the world we live in today. And believe me, that is not an exaggeration. We're talking about a conflict that kicks off in the Middle Ages and basically doesn't stop until the modern era. To really get a feel for this, we're not going to start at the beginning. No, we're going to jump right into the middle of the action, on one single, very muddy field. All right, so we're dropping right into the heart of the 100 Years' War at a battle so famous it's become the stuff of legend. It's a real-life David versus Goliath story. So picture this. On one side, you've got the English army led by King Henry V. They are completely wiped out, exhausted, and sick after a long campaign. And on the other side, you have the flower of French nobility, a massive, confident army, totally decked out and expecting a quick, easy win. And that's the key right there. The English had a secret weapon, the longbow. Henry picked this narrow, muddy battlefield on purpose, knowing the French knights in their heavy armor couldn't charge. Instead, they got stuck in the mud and were met with just a devastating storm of arrows that could punch right through their armor. Their numbers meant nothing. It was a death trap. Agincourt was this unbelievable victory, for sure, but it was just one battle in a much, much bigger war. So it begs the question, right? Why were they even fighting in the first place? Let's zoom out and take a look at the bigger picture. That incredible battle was just one moment in what we call the 100 Years' War, which, fun fact, actually lasted 116 years. And the reasons for it? Well, it was a tangled mess of land, money, and, you guessed it, power. So, you see, this wasn't about one single thing. It was kind of a perfect storm. The English owned valuable land inside France, which caused constant friction. On top of that, the English king had a legitimate, if complicated, claim to the French throne itself. And of course, there was money. Control over rich trade routes was a huge prize. It was just a recipe for decades and decades of war. And this, right here, gets to the absolute heart of the problem. Can you imagine being the King of England, a powerful ruler in your own right, but for your lands in France, you're a vassal? That meant you had to literally kneel and pay homage to the King of France. For England's Edward III, that was just humiliating. So he thought, why be his subordinate for a piece of the kingdom when I can just claim the whole thing? Now, you'd think over 100 years of brutal fighting would be enough for anyone, but you'd be wrong. This rivalry was so deep that even after the 100 Years' War was officially over, the fighting just kept starting again. And you can see it on this timeline. The end of one war was just the start of a new chapter. Through the 1500s, 1600s, and 1700s, any time there was a major war in Europe, it didn't matter what it was about, you could pretty much guarantee that England and France would be on opposite sides. The reasons changed, but that rivalry was always there, just waiting to explode. And this is where everything changes. This is where the rivalry goes from being a European squabble over some territory to a full-blown fight for the entire planet. Historians call the 7 Years' War World War Zero for a really good reason. It was the first time you saw a conflict on this massive, global scale. Britain and France were pouring every resource they had into a final struggle for total global supremacy. Sure, the war was still happening in the usual places, in Europe. This right here, the French invasion of a British-held island in the Mediterranean, was actually one of the sparks that officially kicked the whole thing off. Controlling naval bases like this was absolutely crucial. But the real prize, that was overseas. In North America, the fight was for control of a whole continent and its vast resources. And when the British captured the city of Quebec in 1759, well, that was pretty much the death knell for France's colonial dreams there. And at the exact same time, halfway around the world in India, the two superpowers were fighting a proxy war through their massive trading companies. The British and French East India companies backed different local rulers, battling for control. And in the end, Britain won there too, laying the groundwork for the British Empire in India. So, Britain's victory in this global chess match was decisive. They'd won. But a win on this scale? Well, it comes with a massive price tag. And the consequences of this victory weren't just about redrawing maps. They were immediate, they were profound, and they would change the course of history forever. First, the human cost was just staggering. An estimated 1.5 million people died. And get this, the vast majority weren't even soldiers. They were civilians, caught in the crossfire or dying from the starvation and disease that always followed these armies. And the financial cost? It was just as catastrophic. Britain's national debt more than doubled, pushing the nation right to the brink of bankruptcy. So you've won the world, but you're broke. How on earth do you pay for a war that expensive? Well, Britain had an idea: make its newly secured American colonies help foot the bill. This led to a whole bunch of new taxes that the colonists saw as totally unfair, sparking protests, rebellion, and ultimately, the American Revolution. The war against France directly created the conditions for the birth of the United States. And France didn't get off easy either. The humiliating defeat, the loss of its empire, and its own crushing debt created a massive national crisis. All of that, combined with years of inequality, pushed French society right to its breaking point, exploding into the French Revolution of 1789. So when you really stop and think about it, this incredible feud, which started over feudal claims and muddy battlefields, spiraled into a global conflict whose aftershocks created two of the world's most influential nations and set the stage for the British Empire. It really makes you wonder, what other parts of our world today were forged by rivalries we don't even think about anymore?